Welcome back to the You Not Me podcast. In today's episode, Chris and Andrew are going to be digging into a lot of personal reflection. Today, we're going to be focusing on discussing who changed you. At the end of the day, none of us are self-made. We all have influence from people in our lives who have corrected us, who have encouraged us, who have given us wisdom, who have come alongside us just to support us whenever we've needed it. And if most of us are honest, we can usually trace real change back to a specific person at a specific point in our life. It's not usually so much the things that happen to us, but more so how people influence us that makes change in life. And most of our growth doesn't come from comfortable conversations or easy experiences. So today, we're not necessarily going to be talking about famous mentors in that sense, but more so ordinary people who took responsibility to make someone else around them better. So guys, when you think about real change that happened to you in your life, was it driven more by encouragement, by challenge, or by someone who just refused to let you stay the same, who saw potential in you?
I think for me, real change in my life was really about somebody challenging me to do more than I thought that I was capable of. And I wasn't realizing my full potential. I can think about a couple different examples of that. One I'll talk about today, but it really is somebody that just didn't give up on me and didn't settle, wouldn't let me settle for being good enough. And they were willing to risk their relationship with me to help me become a better person.
Yeah, for me, I mean, the one that I'm going to go in depth about today is one that was an unbelievable encouragement. But I've also had somebody that I know I mentioned it in the book. Just when I was in college, and I was self-focused, and I didn't start my last game my senior year, and it just absolutely shattered me. But this coach wouldn't let me. Pull the team down in the way that I was just going to be totally selfish in the fact that I just cared about myself instead of, being a leader on the team and caring deeply about my brothers. And so, I've had a lot of both of those. I've had the ones that have encouraged, the ones that have challenged, and then the ones that have just wouldn't, they wouldn't, they were consistent. They wouldn't just leave me be in my own mess. And so, it's amazing when you look back and see how many people have really influenced and impacted your life, and what a blessing it is that they came along.
And something else I just wanted to quickly mention that, one thing I've learned throughout the years is that kind of being in community is huge. My wife is my absolute best friend, and most incredible mom to our kids, and she is incredible. But that doesn't replace the need for me to have other guys in my life that can hold me accountable. We can help each other to live with integrity and purpose and service. And so again, I just think that's something as I think about the last, 50 years of living, being in community with other guys, in addition to my wife has been really, really important and impactful to me.
No, that's huge. And I think that none of us can have any real change in our lives in isolation. We need people who are outside of us who don't have this bias that we have towards ourselves. I mean, some of us have a really negative bias towards ourselves, and that's where all of this stuff comes in, right? You need encouragement from some people, you need critique from others, wisdom from others, someone who's just going to give you belief when you need it from others. So everyone has their own individual biases, whether it's negativity or you have pride or whatever it might be. So we need other people, and we need a variety of perspectives as well. Obviously, a spouse or a significant other can give you obviously a lot of perspective and plenty of ways that you can grow, for all of us. But having those male, or if it's a woman who's a listener, having female friendships of depth and of vulnerability where they can really see into your life and just give their perspective, it's obviously huge.
Yeah, it's funny when you mentioned community, Andrew. The biggest time that we're our most vulnerable is when we're in isolation, and I've seen. I mean, again, whether it's you watch National Geographic and animals hunting other animals, which one do they go after when they start chasing the herd? It's the one that falls behind. They just stop chasing all the rest and go after that one because they're isolated. And what I've seen, whether it's myself or friends, the ones are when I know that there's something going on. It's when I don't hear from them in a while, and they get quiet, they get silent, and sometimes it's just they're super busy, and you check in on them, and they're like, oh no, I'm fine, I'm good, everything's fine. But sometimes when you notice someone is kind of absent and quiet, and you check in, that's when I've found friends that are at some of their lowest points and been able to come alongside them, and people come alongside me as well, and so. Community is such a huge, and which is again why You Not Me was started. It's about relationship. If we don't have relationship, we are lonely. There are so many things that go awry. We fall into self-justification. We look at the world for what's true, what's not true, and we need to be reminded of who we are and whose we are, and that takes brothers and sisters along with us.
Chris, so I want to start with you and your story. I want to know who the person was who really spoke into your life and made a big difference. Just kind of background me on where you were in life when they showed up and what you were blind to at the time.
I mean, we've talked about this, I think, a lot of times, in the fact of where, one of the biggest turning points of my life was, but also what You Not Me was almost, born out of, was in the midst of 2008, when we lost everything financially, and the real estate crash. And during the time, my youngest son was diagnosed with a retinoblastoma. We were losing everything financially. My wife wanted to stay home with our kids, and literally we were losing everything financially. And I was trying to figure out what to do. I had no idea, and didn't have many mentor or really any mentors in my life. And so I was in my 30s and trying to figure this all out, and you have the stress of what's happening, everything's falling apart, real estate market's crashing, and somebody pointed me to a man named Bill Greer, and he was kind enough and gracious enough to meet me on a Saturday morning at 7 in the morning, and we just sat down, and he said, "Hey, how can I help? What's going on?" And I just threw up everything that was going wrong, and I'd done this and this happened. I was losing this and it was my fault and this and this. And then he just stopped me for a second and he said, "Hold on a second. I just want to ask you one question." He said, "Have you forgiven yourself yet?" And I just sat stunned. Like, I had never even thought remotely about forgiving myself, because I had done this, made all these mistakes. My family was in this, this place of devastation financially. Um, And so, like, for him to come alongside me, and I'll talk more about just how that progressed, but for him to ask that one question, it really changed a lot of things, because I had not done that. And I think easily one of the things we can do is look back at our past, whether it's an hour ago or 10 years ago, and there's shame and regret in the form of a ball and chain that's shackled to our legs, that we're trying to either move forward, and we're barely able to drag it along, or it's so heavy that we're just stuck and we can't move forward. And he was the person that came in and just chopped that chain in half, so I could start walking forward again.
What was it that made his advice land different from other people? Because I'm sure that you had probably had other people mention something to you or try to encourage you in some way, but what was it that really stuck out about Bill's advice?
Well, it was interesting because when he said, "Have you forgiven yourself yet?" I think, I'd been walking in my faith, but when he said that, and he said, "Because Jesus already has forgiven you, so why are you continuing to beat yourself up?" And that it was one of those where this weight got lifted off of me, to remember and just be reminded of what he's done for me on the cross, and how that, yeah, maybe I made some financial investments that were maybe good at the time, but had no idea what was going to happen in the future. But he loved me anyway, and he would provide and take care of my family. And then how Bill from there basically said, "I'm here with you and I will walk with you forward." basically we sat down and we kept meeting for a number of, over years, and we just chunked all the problems into little bits and started working our way through them. And I think for me, the thing that was so big was I didn't have anybody that was older than me or financially or years, wiser. And I had just people my age around me. So nobody had experienced this before. Um, and so for him to take the time to care enough to give of his time and to just be willing to help a total stranger walk through something when it was one of the darkest times I've ever been in, because of all the stuff with my son and his health. And literally everything was yanked out from underneath me. And what I thought was my security, which was finances and my plan for the future and investments, was gone in a heartbeat. And how he just lovingly, patiently, calmly said, I'm here with you. I'll stand in the gap and I'll help you walk through it. Now, I don't know how God's going to do this. He's like, but let's just start with this and then move to this. And let's just give room God to show up and just walk through it. And it was unbelievable how things worked out, even though it took almost 7 years to get through everything. So it was a lot of suffering and reminder, and the enemy could, easily at times reminded me of what I had done wrong and shame and, all that. But I had a friend that was always there to, in the midst of my loneliness and trying to carry the load on my own, walked alongside me. And he reminded me that, hey, and by the way, God wants to walk alongside you with this. And walk you through it. Not just like he's here for a bit and then gone. It's like he's here and that's it. He's here. He wants to walk with you. And I think that's the hardest thing right now is a lot of people via social media and everything else, there's so much loneliness, not wanting to be vulnerable about struggles and trials, that they're trying to carry this huge weight and burden on their own. And, that's why we need community, but also we need to remember we're not alone, that God is with us and he wants to walk with us. We just have to allow him to, because part of it is we just run and try to do it all on our own, in our own way, in our own strength, and we fall short.
You touched a little bit on security earlier, and I'm just kind of curious, what did his question or his encouragement really expose in you?
Yeah, it helped me see that I was thinking I was a self-made person and I had built this all up on my own and I was smart and I could handle all of this. And ultimately I realized that I don't wake myself up every day. The number of times my heart beats, my lungs, inflate and deflate while I'm, breathing in the middle of the night. Like I don't control any of this. And I think that's one of the hardest things is that we're taught, whether it's through sports or work, or whatever, work hard, do this, do that. And so then we're, our mind thinks that we control the outcome. And what he helped me remember is that the Lord is sovereign and he controls the outcome. And what I think is this path is the right way. If it doesn't go that direction, it goes this direction, I get anxious and frustrated because I'm not going the direction I think it should go. And therefore it's wrong and it's bad. And, people have asked me a number of times, well, if you had to go through it again, would you do it all over again? And the answer is absolutely 100%, because I wouldn't be who the person I am. I wouldn't be the man, the father, the husband that I am, if it wasn't for that. And it was literally because of someone came alongside me and said, I'll walk with you.
We talk about you, not me influence. It usually comes at a cost to the person who's influencing. So when you look at Bill and you kind of reflect on what he meant to you, what did it really cost him and what made it such a you, not me leadership and influence moment for you?
Well, and thankfully, Bill is a very gracious man. He is very kind with his time to build into people. So I was pointed in a wonderful direction, but also it was time. It was sacrifice that he could have been with his spouse, his grandkids, doing other things for himself, and he faithfully, when I called, when I texted, when I asked to meet, his door was always open. It was to hear him say, how can I help you? And I know what he was really wanting was not to say like, hey, I want to come alongside you. I want to walk with you. I want to be your mentor. He wanted me to be the one to ask, like, hey, will you walk with me? Because he never tries to force himself, never tries to coerce somebody, which Jesus never did. No, Jesus never said, you have to follow me. He said, if you want, come follow me. But he never forced anybody. And it was, when he asked me what he could do, and I said, I would love for you to walk with me through this, mentor me, etc. And he said, there's nothing that would give me greater pleasure. And just his kindness. And even it's interesting, even today, I called him this morning because we haven't caught up in a while, and I told him what we were doing, and we're catching up tonight. Because I think it's wonderful if this person is still in your life constantly, maybe you can catch up, but a lot of times we still forget to remind them and tell them how much we're thankful for what they've done for us, because um, they need that encouragement too. And it gives them the strength, or empowers them to say, like, A, I was helpful, but B, keep doing it because it matters. And so I think even just, for him, it cost him a lot of time and even just brain power to think about a plan to walk through. And but he was always available.
Two quick questions here then to wrap this up. Um, what really changed in your life moving out of this conversation that you had with him? And then looking back, had you not met with Bill that one morning, what would your life look like now?
Yeah, what changed was, I mean, in the Bible, it talks about, for me and my family, we'll serve the Lord. And for me, it was realizing that, like, I can't do any of this on my own. Um, and for me, understanding how much God loves me and what he did, and that, it's because of what I have done is why he went to the cross, and out of being willing to suffer and yet love greater than the suffering. For me, it's like I made my decision. Who am I going to live for? And it's for him. And that's again where, you not me is Christ is the perfect example of living out you not me, of sacrificing, yourself for somebody else. And so for me, it was, I wanted to change. And instead of just walking in my faith, I wanted to run. I wanted to sprint, and I wanted to, take every moment that I could to love the person sitting in front of me like Bill did to me. Because he, in the midst of, my dad wasn't helpful, I was missing that in my life. And that's where it even spurred me to then start mentoring high school boys, high school athletes, and trying to come alongside them, because they may or may not have had great parents, but if I could do for somebody what Bill did for me, just to show up consistently and to make sure that they felt loved, valued, and cared for, and that they had someone to speak to and somebody that would love them unconditionally, then that's, what, if I can do it for one person, then it's enough, but I want to do it for as many as I can. And what was the last question you asked? Sorry. Oh, where would I be? Where would I be if it weren't for Bill? Uh, I don't even know. I mean, again, when I look at what that time meant to me and how much changed in my heart from being so broken and realizing that, A, I make mistakes all the time. B, God loves me anyway. And C, I need to walk forward in a way that's trusting and glorifying him. Um, I just can't even, I mean, I can't imagine what my marriage would be like. Can't imagine what my relationship with my kids would be like. I'd be living for finances, and I mean, and again, thankfully my wife was gracious enough to stay by my side, in the midst of losing everything financially, where some people that ruins their marriage. And my boys, I mean, they're way better than I was at their age, but it's because of me, waking up to what really mattered most. And I think there were probably 4 and 2 or 5 and 3 at the time. And so when I look at who I was as a dad before that and after that, I wasn't a bad dad, but I wasn't nearly as intentional as what I became. To realize that all that matters is relationships, and again, back to just someone that I'd never even met, that was willing to raise their hand and say, "Hey, I'll meet with you. I'll have a conversation and see how this person wants to move forward." And Bill was just an amazing blessing. So that's why, we hope to be the person that stands in the gap for you. You, not me, if you don't have anybody, but also we want to teach you how to create those great relationships and how to reach out to people and build community so that you can have people that not only lift you up and help you when you're struggling and encourage you, but also hold you accountable and remind you of the standard of that you want to live by. And ultimately, it's just those relationships are the thing that allow us to go, put one foot in front of the other each day.
Yeah, thanks for sharing all that, Chris. Andrew, to pivot to you now. Just go ahead and kind of share a little bit about the person who made a big change in your life and had a big impact on you, and kind of follow up with you from there.
That sounds good. Yeah, the friend I want to talk about today is a friend of mine, John Ellett. John was actually my next door neighbor in college. So we were he was in the dorm room next to mine, and he was my first real accountability partner, and that's what I'll call it, because I was still at that point in my life, still learning how to be a good friend and how to make good friendships. Without going into too much of my past, I just didn't have a strong history of that. And uh, I was very early on in my faith walk, and I was saying all the right things about the kind of person I want to be, somebody that's focused on others, living with purpose. But honestly, I was still living life mainly for myself, and I was really blind to how to be a good friend and one that serves and puts others' needs first. And John was the first person to come alongside me. In fact, I remember this day vividly. We were walking across campus at Westmont College in California, and he put his arm around me and gently showed me how I could have handled a conflict differently. He didn't yell or judge. He just pointed out a gap between who I said I wanted to be and how I was acting. And it just forever changed me. He was really when I think about true friendship, it's easy to be friendly. It's easy to be like the nice person, and it's easy to be courteous, but it's a whole nother thing to actually, risk the relationship and risk the friendship to help build another person up. And we weren't friends for that long. I mean, we had been friends for a few months at that time, but I just think about kind of his advice and, that first moment that really kicked off what has been a friendship ever since.
And had you had anyone else speak into you about these kinds of things before? I mean, you mentioned that you kind of had a bit of an awareness yourself that you were kind of stuck relationally, and there was a bit of a conflict between the person that you claimed or wanted to be and who you actually were. Had you received feedback from anyone else? And if you had, what made John's comments different from those people's?
Well, I think John is the most genuine person, and selfless person that I've known. He is somebody who, back then, if you met him today, you would see a guy who has an incredible marriage. Or it's just incredible. I mean, they have an incredible family, and John is very selfless. And so I had a number of friends that, were, good, you know, good friends. I don't know how else to say it, but John's friendship was different. His friendship was different because he really came alongside me in a way that kind of spoke into me and said, "Hey, as friends, we are brothers from a different mother, and let's help each other become men of integrity and the men that God's designed us to be." And so I think that's what kind of hit differently. When he gave me that feedback, I knew that it was coming from a place that was genuine and a place that he really had my best interests at heart. And he wanted to see me be become the person that God designed me to be, and vice versa. And he knew that we needed to have those kinds of, that kind of friendship, and we needed to have that kind of tough love to help build each other up.
What did you feel like that conversation ended up exposing in you when it comes to your character and just that gap between who you claimed to be or wanted to be and who you were?
Yeah. If I'm brutally candid, it was exposed how I was blind to my own hypocrisy. I could talk a big game about faith and service, but when it comes right down to it, am I really living that out? And it forced me to stop kind of focusing on me and really think about, okay, what are my motivations? Who do I want to become? And am I doing the things that I need to do to, build others up? When I think about how I would handle conflict or you know, am I handling things with grace and integrity, or am I handling things out of anger and selfishness? And growth isn't easy. It's not easy. Like I think about that time, and it was like a mirror was put in front of me, and it was like, hey, you're looking at yourself. You need to hold yourself accountable. And John was that mirror for me, and it pushed me on a path to really becoming a more honorable and man of integrity. And when I think about that time, I it was after that I began to like my whole life changed. My whole life changed after that. I became much more involved in service on our campus. There were probably 20 or 25 different organizations that the students on campus would volunteer in the community. So things like Salvation Army and, other organizations. And so I ended up being the one of the co-leaders, kind of organizing a lot of that. And then a year after that is when I met my wife, and who we're now celebrating 28 years of marriage this year. And so I think about just how God used John to help steer me in the right direction to what I was doing in my life shortly thereafter. I mean, there was no way in the shape I was in that I could have been the man that my wife ultimately wanted to meet and marry. I needed to do a lot of changing before that, and so I'm very, very grateful. And I think about just how God works and how God used John, and our families are still very, very close today. Even though he lives in California and we live in North Carolina, we're still very, very close and talk weekly. So
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that distinction that you hit on between being friendly and being a true friend. I think it's so easy to get that wrong if we have fear of man or we're concerned more so for people's feelings than their growth. Obviously, you don't want to completely disregard someone's feelings, and you have to have wisdom about how you speak into someone's life and when. But it's really easy to just be the nice guy that everyone likes instead of having those hard conversations like John did, and even kind of challenging you, Chris, obviously, to forgive yourself like Bill did. I mean, Bill could have just patted you on the back without asking you any difficult questions. So I think there's a lot of common threads between both of your stories, both of the influences that you've had in your lives, and I think that one of the things, well, a few of the things that usually characterize true influence are people telling you the truth. A lot of times, the truth that you don't really want to hear, but you probably need to hear the most. Giving of their time in a self sacrificial way. And then also stepping out and risk. I think, especially Andrew, when it comes to your story, like you maybe, given where you were, could have easily blown up on John and told him to just like take a hike. Been like, hey man, like I really could care less about your perspective on this. So I think that obviously, someone has to at some point risk their comfort of bringing up a hard conversation, potentially put a friendship on the line, depending on what's going on. So I wanted to just turn to you guys and ask you uh, why it's not enough in a relationship to only encourage someone or to only be positive all the time.
well, I think when I think about John and I think about what he didn't give me some like vague encouragement or just a pat on the back. He gave me very kind of clear, specific truth. And so I think that, because I think that that's when I think about the way that he shared the feedback to me, it, I mean, it was honest, and it was like piercing right to the heart. And it also wasn't like a one-time comment. I mean, John and I have this relationship that, that we, that it really, that was the start of an ongoing relationship. And I think that it's trying to think of the right words to use. But, I mean, he really, he risked awkwardness. He risked me, to your point, Jared, getting defensive and pulling away, um, so that he could invest in me. And thankfully, it ended up kind of growing and strengthening our relationship. But it was that deepening relationship and having that relational equity between us, where his feedback kind of had that as a backdrop. It I probably would have heard it differently if we weren't close friends, if I didn't know him. But we did, start this friendship, and out of that friendship is where the feedback came from.
Yeah, man, I think you need to, earn the right to lovingly correct somebody. And the person needs to know your heart when you're saying something that maybe is hard for you to even remotely receive it well. Because if you don't think the person cares about you, or if it's just, they just see you and they just like, oh, that's terrible, and you shoot you a zinger, well, you're going to get defensive right away. And a lot of times either, zinger back or zing even worse back or whatever, right? And it gets escalated. And but again, when we show up and we're consistent and people know how much we care, and that our feedback, even though maybe it's hard to swallow, is genuine and it's in our best interest, like we can receive it so much better. And I think even, this actually goes back to what you asked me, like, Jared, where would I be now? But if it weren't for Bill showing up consistently, and that's why it can't just be encouragement, because my dad, who, a great person, if you met him, charismatic, so kind, give you a shirt off his back. But whenever I called him with hard things, he would say, "Oh, you and Carly are always so great. You guys will make a great decision, whatever." And that was it. And so it's just left on your own to figure it out. And though I appreciated the encouragement, it wasn't helpful, right? It was, I don't know if he didn't want to get involved or didn't know the answers, or I don't know, whatever. But the unfortunate last 20 years of his life was not a great, super engaged relationship with me, where Bill didn't know me from anybody, came alongside, said, I'll walk with you. And if it wasn't for Bill, I mean, I would have tried to handle it on my own strength. I would have made bad decisions. They've been rushed decisions. I would have been anxious. I would have been stressed out. I would have had, been snapping at my wife, snapping at my kids, forgetting who I was, carrying shame forward, constantly beating myself up with that ball and chain, not being able to move forward. But he gave me hope. He gave me hope that someone was going to walk with me, and ultimately reminded me who my greatest hope was in, that he would never leave me, never forsake me. And so I think just a kind word of encouragement isn't enough, and you have to be willing to get your hands dirty and walk with somebody. And sometimes you're going to have hard conversations like Andrew's friend did, but at the same time, what an amazing gift, to have a friend care enough about you to say something hard.
Like when we think about, if you're down a certain path, doesn't matter what it is. If you're down a certain path and you want to shift course, it's hard. It hurts, and there's going to be friction. And really, this is just an encouragement to anybody that's listening. There is somebody in your life that needs to hear this tough love from you. Somebody that you have relational equity with, and they are looking for that feedback, and nobody is likely giving them that feedback and loving them in that way. And I'm just so grateful that my life is so much better because I had a close friend actually take that step and create that positive change, kind of in my life.
And I would say, I mean, it's great to have friends that you get along really well, you never have issues and all that stuff. But the greatest relationships are the ones that have scars, the ones that you've had conflict, but you've also loved each other so much that you're willing to look beyond it and also reflect, and maybe even ask for forgiveness, repent, because maybe you were wrong, they were wrong, etc. But you see over and over again, if something happens, that person won't leave me. Like they're here. And which is again back to a marriage. You're going to have hard times. I mean, if you have children, you're going to have hard times because raising kids is not easy. It's exhausting, especially at young ages. And then the things that happen with decisions they make, or things that happen that other people do to them, or whatever, or just accidents, and it is so hard. And I mean, even back to, we've talked about the Harvard, adult developmental study, when they looked at people that were the happiest in their 80s and the healthiest, it was they could tell based on the age 50 what their relationships were like. And if they had a marriage, even if there was slight bickering, but those people were truly locked in, covenantly committed to each other, they were the healthiest, they were the happiest, they were the ones whose cognitive function was the best. And I think that's just what we need to remember, is that the best relationships are not the ones that are just easy all the time and there's no issues. Sometimes that's because you're cowardly and you're not willing to speak up, to say somebody needs to change something, or you're not willing to speak the hard truth. And so, um, I think often, unfortunately, friendships fall apart because one person does something wrong and the other person walks away, and they aren't willing to, as Christ said, turn the other cheek and say, like, hey, you may have insulted me or done something, but this cheek is always here ready for you to come back and form that relationship back again. And I'm willing to forgive you and love you through it. And I mean, again, that's what we need now. That's what's tearing the world apart, is nobody's willing to listen or forgive or understand. And that's what true relationship does, is they listen intently, they care deeply, and they suffer sacrificially.
And another thought too, Chris, on this is, I think it's important to remember and really think through what's the best way to communicate with somebody. I can think about a few examples where I thought I was giving somebody some loving feedback, but it was in a way that it was via a text, or it was delivered in a way that wasn't the most optimal. And so I think that different people hear and receive things differently. And I just think that's an important thing to remember, for that, if you're wanting to, give somebody that loving feedback and come alongside them, to do that in a way where where they're going to best hear it and best receive it.
Yeah, and I'd just like to double down on the challenge that you gave, especially Andrew, for listeners to kind of turn the lens outward a bit and just take some time to think about people around them and take inventory, to consider who maybe needs encouragement, who needs challenge and truth in those hard conversations, who needs belief. And, even maybe like Chris's friend Bill, who needs to just forgive themselves and move on from their past and take steps forward. And I think that there's a lot of hinders that can prevent people from taking these steps to have these kinds of conversations. Uh, Most of them have to do with fear. It's fear of conflict, fear of rejection, uh, fear of having to take the responsibility to be the person to have that conversation. A lot of people just want to punt that down the road. Maybe say, "Oh, I'll have it next year," or, "Well, next time we're in person." The hard thing is that we're not promised tomorrow. And I think that there's a lot of people, all of us included, who have done the punting of conversations down the road, and we end up regretting it, because that opportune time sometimes never comes. And the opportune time was yesterday. So we just definitely encourage anyone out there listening to this to really take the time to reflect, and then just don't wait to be inspired. Just take the step now and choose to be the change, for the people around you. Um, just to close, I think that when we're talking about Unami influence, the greatest compliment that you can ever receive is never going to be someone just running down a list of accomplishments that you've made in your life. I mean, both of you guys have a lot of accomplishments from your professional and corporate careers. But I think that if I ran through that list, you wouldn't really feel a whole lot of pride or achievement or satisfaction from me just naming those things. But if I played a video montage for you of all of the people that you've influenced through the relationships that you've had, the conversations you've had, the encouragement you've given, that would probably mean a lot more to you. So for all the listeners out there, just choose to invest in the things that really are going to matter in the long term.
A few things. So as we close, there are a couple of things that kind of come to my mind. One, None of us change alone. I would not be the man, the husband, the father I am today without my friend John stepping in and refusing to let me stay the same. And none of us are meant to grow alone. And when you think about who is your circle? We need people to love us enough to speak into us and encourage us. And you need to be doing that with other people. And also just look around. There's somebody in your life right now. They need encouragement. They need that challenge. They need somebody to believe in them. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to wait until you feel ready. You just have to be willing and, tell somebody that I see you. I'm not giving up on you. And let's work together on who you're meant to be. And so just go be that somebody today.
If someone comes to mind right now, send them a text, pick up the phone, call them, and just tell them thank you. Like I did with Bill. It was awesome to hear his voice. It had been a while, and he and I are both very excited to catch up. And so I'm just even thankful for this podcast, just to get a chance to talk about this. And even though Bill comes to mind often, I don't often enough text him and tell him thank you. And I think, again, what a blessing and encouragement you can be to somebody when you just tell them thank you, because if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be who I am today.